Welcome back. I'm Dr. Cheek and I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. And today we need to talk. And what we need to talk about is this idea that sharing relatable stories in a conversation is somehow rude or inconsiderate. Now, first things first, let's define conversation. A conversation is typically an engagement between one or more people where you share or exchange ideas, news, and thoughts. Keyword here being exchange. An exchange means a give and take. It's not a one-sided engagement. It's an exchange. You give, you take. And when we're having a conversation, the idea of being able to relate to someone speaking with you or talking to you is a desire to make a connection. We share relatable situations or relatable stories as a way to connect. And that's how conversations typically evolve and continue to happen. And that's kind of how you get to know other people. You can't really get to know people if you're only sharing your experience and they never really get to share about themselves. So that's the give and take that typically happens in conversations. And that's the give and take we want to continue to happen in conversations moving forward. And sometimes I think we need to learn how to distinguish between someone sharing a relatable story and someone being dismissive or competitive in their stories that they're telling you and someone who's not listening. So let's talk about each one of them. Now, that very first one, a relatable story. A relatable story when you're having a conversation is a story that is similar to or is in line with what you're talking about. It's simply saying in that moment that I've had a similar experience and I can empathize with you because I have a similar experience. This is my way of telling you I understand you, I empathize with you, I get it. And just as an example, simple example, let's say your story is you went to Best Buy, tried to find a USB or a micro SD card, a memory card, and you couldn't find it at Best Buy. You end up going to another store, couldn't find it at that store, end up having to buy it online. Simple story. A relatable story would be something that sounds a little bit like this. I went to a different store and then I went to Best Buy and I couldn't find that same memory card and had to order it online too. I know, crazy. Having to order stuff online instead of being able to get it in the store. That's a relatable story. And that demonstrates that I hear you. I've had a similar experience. Now, on the other side of that, we have people who tend to have dismissive stories or competitive stories or stories that show that it's actually competing with what you're experiencing and what this may look like. Someone who is being dismissive of you, of your experience, may devalue or make you feel like your story is not relevant or is a waste of time or not something they wanted to listen to. That's when they're being dismissive. Now, competitive is whenever you tell someone a story, regardless of the story, the intensity of what's happening in that moment, their version of what has happened to them is either much worse or much better than your experience. And that is what sometimes I think we get conflated or confused with relatable stories because it sounds similar, but the competitive story is a little different. Now let's focus on dismissive first. Now, an example of dismissive, we're going to use that same Best Buy story that I did earlier. A dismissive response to that would be something like, well, at least you had the money enough to be able to have gas to go to all these different stores and buy the stuff you need online. I can't even afford to get gas nowadays. In that moment, it sounds like a similar story because you're talking about being able to drive and move and get to somewhere. But at the same time, what they're actually doing is being dismissive of your experience. And that makes you feel devalued and like someone is not really caring to engage with you moving forward. Now, what does a competitive story sound like? A competitive story may sound like, well, when I went to Best Buy, I was able to find it on the first go. You must have been looking in the wrong place. Dismissive, but again, it's that competition of, I did the same thing, but my mind turned out much better than yours. Sometimes we get those mixed up with relatable stories, and we all have had conversations with those types of individuals. Now, that last one is not listening or unrelated stories. Now, we all have had this experience where you tell someone a story and they reply with something that had absolutely nothing to do with what your story was about in any way. Now, what this may sound like is same Best Buy situation, but the response to that from the person you're in the conversation with could be something like, yeah, I went to the Kroger store the other day and I was in there for about 45 minutes and I left without buying anything. What exactly did that have to do with the conversation I just had about going to Best Buy trying to find a memory card? How does that relate? And if this is someone you're close enough to, that might be a question to ask. Like, what was the point of that story? How does that go in line with what we are talking about or what I was talking about in that moment? And what that demonstrates in that moment is they may not have been listening. They may have caught on to one word you said, whether it's the store or traveling or whatever it was. And in that moment, they started to think about or replay in their mind what their response is going to be. And while they're replaying this in their mind, the only thing they're listening to you for at this moment is for the sound of your voice to stop. So they're not hearing the words, but they hear the sound and they're simply waiting till that sound stops. And then they actually add their input. And normally their input does not match anything you just said, typically because they haven't heard anything you said. They've been spending much of the time in their head thinking about what they want to say next. Does that always mean that someone's not listening to you, someone's being rude, someone's actively being rude? No, that can sometimes mean someone who struggles with being able to be an active listener or someone who gets easily distracted. And I've noticed a lot of things going around about normalizing not sharing relatable stories when somebody's trying to tell you something or when a friend is sharing a story or a conversation. And that's not something I want us to normalize, because normalizing one-sided engagements with individuals in a relationship setting or in a friendship setting or even in a coworker or individual setting when you meet a stranger, that doesn't lend itself well to building relationships. That lends itself well to you feeling like everything is about you and your experience, and the other person feeling like they have no room to share their thoughts and their experiences. And that's not the type of relationships we want to build moving forward. So here are some things we should and shouldn't normalize. So one thing we should not normalize is one-sided engagements, one-sided interactions with individuals where one person is monopolizing the entirety of the conversation and the other person feels like they have no ability to share or to engage. Another thing we should not normalize is being so self-focused, so self-interested, so self-involved that you feel like any interactions with someone that is not focused on yourself is somehow rude or disregarding your experience. The same way you want to be heard, others want to be heard as well. Now, some things we should normalize. What we should normalize is balanced engagements or balanced interactions with people, whether it's strangers or people we know. Normalize being able to openly have a conversation without having rules or policing how someone engages in the conversation unless they are intentionally being rude or dismissive of what you're speaking about. And that leads me to the next, is normalize knowing the difference between someone telling you a relatable story, someone telling you a story that is dismissive or competitive of your story, or someone telling you a story that is completely unrelated. Know the difference. Those last two, unrelated and dismissive or competitive, those types of conversations or those types of engagements or responses to your stories feel very upsetting. And it also lends itself to the idea that if I can't talk to you about something as simple as going to a Best Buy without trying to be guilted into feeling a different way or feeling like I have to compete with whatever story you are going to come up with, if I can't have this simple conversation with you about that, then what are more vulnerable conversations about my experiences or things I'm feeling or having to go with? What are those conversations going to be like? And if I feel like I can't trust you with the simple conversations, I'm definitely not going to be willing to have those more vulnerable, in-depth conversations with you. It may always be surface level, something that I'm okay with you not hearing, something that I'm okay with you being dismissive of, something that I'm okay with sharing and not really caring how you interpret it or engage with it. It's not a lot of what we talk about, but that tends to be small talk. Also, I want us to normalize being considerate of others and not getting offended by normal, common social engagements. There are enough negative, upsetting, overwhelming things that is happening in this current environment that we don't really need to find things to be offended by. Someone sharing a relatable story with you just to demonstrate that they have a connection or they have an understanding of your experience is not something to be offended by. It's not something that is rude. It's not something that's inconsiderate. It's how we engage in conversation. It's how we get to know one another. The ability to hold a conversation is an art that we're losing, and I don't know if it's because we went through a whole period of life where everyone was in the house. I don't know if it's because we went through a whole period of life where now everyone feels like the best way to communicate is through technology, and now we're sending emails, and before we send that email or before we send that text, we're using ChatGPT or some type of AI to make sure what we're saying is appropriately worded. So I don't know if that's what's getting in the way of us being able to have a conversation or engage in the art of getting to know one another. But either way, the art of conversation is necessary in today's society because we have lost that and we need that. And sharing relatable stories is a way of being able to engage in that conversation. It's a way to build relationships, to get to know one another. And it's not someone being rude or inconsiderate. Rude and inconsiderate is someone being dismissive or competitive of your story and someone not listening to your story. So know the difference. And because we struggle with this ability to have a conversation and know the dynamics of a conversation in this moment, we needed to talk. So I hope you take something from this video today that is helpful, that is useful. Take something from this video today that will be helpful for you to build relationships moving forward. As always, please feel free to jot down any thoughts, questions, or comments you have below. I thank you for taking the time to listen, and I'll be seeing you again very soon. Thank you.